to the Leadership Unveiled podcast series by the HR Association of India. The series explores the minds and journeys of the pioneering leaders, entrepreneurs making waves in the business world. I'm your host, Neha Jagnani, and today we have a truly special guest, a trailblazing leader, a pioneering in their industry, and someone whose journey is as motivating as it is enlightening. Join us in welcoming Tanvi Choksi. Tanvi is the CHRO at JLL Asia Pacific based in India. Leading a team of 400 HR professionals, oversees the people strategy of 45,000 employees. With over 18 years of diverse industry experience, including automotive, agriculture, pharmaceuticals, and real estate, Tanvi excels in organizational development, talent management, and HR transformation. She holds a master's degree in human resources from Tata Institute of Social Science and a bachelor's degree in finance from the Sies College of Commerce and Economics. Tanvi has received numerous recognitions and accolades for her professionalism and contributions. Tanvi, thank you so much for joining us today. How do you feel about this?
Thanks so much, Neha, and thank you for your very kind words in the introduction. I'm really excited to talk to you today and actually share some thoughts, conversations with the community of HRAI.
Fantastic. So, Tanvi, to begin with, could you share with us a little bit about your background and how you got started in the field of HR?
Absolutely. And, this question actually takes me back many, many, many years. I won't say how many, but many years. My journey with HR actually started when I was doing still my undergraduation. In one of my summer breaks, worked with HR consulting and recruiting organization, which was led by two fabulous women, at a time when not many organizations were run by women and not many women were in really awesome leadership positions in India. And I think one was just being able to see them in those roles and, how they work was truly inspiring. But even the work they did and that internship really helped me understand what the HR role can entail and how it can help influence so many parts of the business. Because at the end of it, I think every business is a people business. And as an HR professional, you're contributing to people strategy and really thinking about people in that organization. And I think that is what led me to a career in HR. And after that, I actually explored masters in human resources, which then has led me to a career in HR. And then, of course, Tata Institute of Social Sciences gave me a great grounding in what human resources is, the things we can do. And of course, the amazing experiences I've had after have helped me in good stead.
Sure, fantastic. So, Tanvi, if you have to share maybe one or two pivotal moments that you think have a profound impact of your development as a leader, what would those be?
Truly reflective questions, Neha. But I think I'll start with the one that immediately comes to mind. This takes me back to my MBA program. And to tell you a little bit more about my personal background to help understand this. So I come from a fairly traditional Gujarati family, grew up with only everybody working in their own companies and not really working for other organizations. And therefore, I didn't really appreciate, what jobs can look like and how people can build their careers in different organizations professionally. But I think as I went through my education, etc., became more and more exposed to it. And in my MBA, I actually my marriage was planned before I got into my MBA, so fairly early on. When I went to my HOD in the institute to ask for permission for 3 weeks of leave to get married and things, I think I got the most flabbergasted response from him. Maybe coming from a stereotype that once someone gets married, they will not focus on their career as well as they would if they weren't married or got married late in their life. We almost can't have it both ways. You'll have to choose between a family and a career, and you can't do both. And now, of course, I'm talking of times 20 years ago. Today, luckily, things are much better and different. But that experience of having so much pushback from a really senior member of my academic career at that time,
Mhm.
and then having to really work through a really hard time over the next semester to prove that I don't have to necessarily under prioritize my education to prioritize my family, but you could do both at the same time and not let one compromise the other. If it does mean you have to work a little bit harder, and you have to be clear with picking your priorities on both sides. But if you truly do believe and you have the right support system and mechanisms to make it work, you can make it work. And I think that really did shape a lot of who I am, and how I believe that we should support people in a way in moments in their life when things may not look all simple. And I also believe there's always a solution. If you really want to make something work, you'll find ways to make it work. And just because someone else couldn't do it, or just because it's never been done before, doesn't mean there isn't a different solution that you can find. And I
Fantastic.
think the one other one, as I was talking about, it just came up, is maybe a lot later in my career, as I got into a more senior leadership role and beyond, I started realizing that there's a very, very, you always know that your team is important, but I think as you are growing through the ranks, it's a lot about your own delivery and team delivery, but not really you being it's not about you not being able to do your job because someone else didn't do it. You could still be an amazing individual contributor and do a great job. But I think a big shift for me was when I started leading a much larger team of HR professionals, realizing that I'm only as good as my team, and that ability to, make sometimes hard decisions with members of your team, but that's really benefiting, what we can deliver as a team together really changes. And I also believe that those experiences have really shaped, who I am and what I do.
Wonderful. That's truly intriguing, Tanvi. So, Tanvi, now as you look at the future, what do you envision as the biggest opportunities or challenges for a leader in HRs in today's landscape?
Right. And, this is a topic I've given a little bit of thought, given I'm in the field and sort of thinking about this quite a bit. So I would say there are three things I would like to focus on. The first one is, and maybe talked about a lot in the last few years, but working with gig workforce and working in a hybrid working environment, I think will continue to be a challenge for HR professionals, and also an opportunity because we've had very small sections of our population as gig workforce. There have been certain groups of employee bases which haven't been accessible. People who can't move to urban cities. Populations that didn't have the means to come and live in big cities, or certain diverse populations like women or young mothers who couldn't do jobs because they didn't want to give it everything it needed and needed the flexibility. I think we've opened up so many opportunities for so many such groups of people that have become accessible as a workforce today for organizations. But how do we have that hybrid and gig workforce and build still a really strong organizational culture? I think it's going to be a challenge for the organizations, because I do think culture also comes from a head and heart. And while, in a hybrid environment, it's easy to deal with all the head aspects of it and you can structure them and do things differently. But the heart aspects and the connectedness that's needed to bring a culture alive really struggle in a hybrid environment. So how do we do things differently to bring about that connectedness that can truly build a good organization and a good culture? I think is definitely one of the areas which is an opportunity and a challenge. The second one I would talk about is this dichotomy that we live in today, that we do have a large population as a country. We've probably become the biggest population in the world, but we still have an absolute dearth of talent or a scarcity of talent in specific areas that we need talent in. So how do we bridge that gap of the population catching up to the skills that are needed for them to be tagged as talent and be employed in a way that makes sense for organizations, and really bridging that gap? And I think, some of it is also my third point, which is the whole skills piece and using tech. But before that, I think in bridging that gap of scarcity of talent to this large population really will come through identification of new areas or new spaces from where we can bring talent in. And also, how are we providing a better environment for them in the organizations? And like I said, the third one is then evolving skills, because I think, in the 2010 era, with the mobile phones really becoming accessible to everybody, it was a big shift in how we worked. And it led to jobs just getting evolved significantly. And I think we've seen almost at every decade this big change in technology that has fundamentally changed how we do work and just how we live, right? Like, I think we can't imagine living without our phones anymore. But we did somehow survive early parts, so at least my life and career, without any technology. But I think with AI and a lot of the current new tech that's come in, and I would say generative AI as the biggest change, I think jobs are again going to evolve significantly in the next decade. So how do we keep pace with those evolving skills? And what can we do with it will definitely be an opportunity for us over the next decade or so.
Sure. Great insights, Tanvi, especially the head and heart aspect of the point, and of course adapting to the technology, which is the need of the hour. Great insights. Thank you so much, Tanvi. So my next question to you is, are there any books, podcasts, movies, that have sort of had a significant impact on your growth, be it on the professional front or a personal front, if you would like to share?
Definitely. I think to be honest, I'm not much of a book reader. I've become more accustomed to podcasts and movies and, snippets of information rather than whole books. But it does remind me of maybe two things. One is not really the three that you asked, book, podcast, and movie, but a philosophy of talent assessment or development that I really think is shaped a lot of how I have dealt with things. So, I think growing up in India, there's a lot of focus on what you don't do well and how can you improve what you don't do well. And, you have to keep focusing on that aspect of your life, your career, etc., and try to improve the gaps that you've had. But early in my career, I was introduced to the Strengths Finder approach. And while it is also a book which I have read, I think that philosophy of focusing on your strength, knowing your strengths, and then even a small upskilling in your strength area actually can give you a lot more returns on your investment, so to speak, than continuing to work on your development areas. So I'm not saying it's not important to know your development areas, but I think knowing them and managing them is good enough. You don't have to excel in your areas of development.
Right.
But I think focusing on your strengths and using them really well makes a big difference in what you can deliver, in my view.
Sure.
And a book that really, resonated with me, and again, this takes me back to college days, is a book called The Goal by Eliyahu Goldratt. And, while today it just sounds a bit outdated to talk about a book from such a long time ago, but I think there are a few things in that book that just stick with me no matter how many years it's been. One is the style and way the book is written. So while it's a non-fiction book and, it's a leadership book, it's written in a very fictional fashion, like it's a story. So, it is a book that is researched and said that most people have actually read the whole book cover to cover. Because, many times you pick up a leadership book, you don't read it cover to cover just because it gets a bit boring in how it's written. So this one's quite unique in that sense. And there are some key lessons that have transcended time. And a couple of lessons that I remember from it is one, measurement drives behavior. And the book really talks about that in a very nice way. And I truly believe that if you don't measure things, you can't change behaviors on it. And, that's a philosophy I have continued to use in my career. Second, always seek answers, which basically talks about learning, continuous learning. Like you have to continue to be curious. There are new things happening. And I think the change of pace is just so fast these days that if you aren't just naturally curious, you will soon become outdated with what you know and how you do things. And maybe two more things. The third one I would say is work smarter, not harder. I think there's lots of tools and resources available, but how we use them to make ourselves more efficient is really important. I think gone are the days where only if you work 15 hours a day is what's good. Like, you have to be able to work smarter and get a lot more out of how many hours you want to work than, number of hours. And lastly, look at things holistically. So improve the overall system, not parts of it. Because, the overall system, when you improve, gives you just so much of a multiplied impact than, just individual small changes that you can make. So I think those Strengths Finder and the Goal as a book are the two things that have been very interesting memories of some of the learnings I've had.
Sure. That's truly refreshing. The examples that you shared and the learnings, Tanvi. So this brings us to the last question for today, which is, as you see the HR landscape, continues to evolve. So according to you, what are going to be some of the critical skills or competencies, especially for the aspiring HR professionals who are looking forward to have a meaningful impact or rather become effective change agents in their organization? If you have some advice on that.
Absolutely. So Neha, I don't necessarily have new things completely to say. I think a couple of the things I would say, I think have stood the test of time, and I would have said it maybe even 10 years ago. But I think the first one I would say is commerciality. I think HR people can sometimes not focus on the commercial side of the business. How does the business work? What are the financials of the business? And what does the P&L look like? What are the key drivers that impact the growth of the business? I think that whole commerciality of looking at the organization is very important for HR professionals to have, because I think as you go senior in the organization, if you need to differentiate yourself as I'm a business leader first, and then yes, I come with a HR specialization rather than being just an HR expert who then knows a little bit about the business. So that fundamental shift needs to be there. The second thing I would say is database decision making and using your emotional quotient to build insight, but linked to the data that you can see, I think will be very important, because a lot of data has become available and accessible to us, but how are we using that? And also seeing the non-data based cues that exist, bringing those together to actually make insights and therefore decisions from it will be really important. And the third thing I would say is connectedness, which comes through networking, influencing, stakeholder management. But someone who can truly be a connector of different things, like you can see the connectedness across the different pieces of the puzzle and bring it together. And I think that connectedness, etc., can really play a big role in success of an HR professional. So I think commerciality, database decisions, and connectedness, or being a connector, are very important.
Sure. Wonderful, Tanvi. So this brings us to the end of this podcast. And thank you so much for generously sharing all your experiences and insights with us. It was personally my delight to host you today, and I've had greatly enjoyed conversing with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Neha. My pleasure as well. And thank you to HRAI.
Thank you so much. I'll just have a quick note, Tanvi, to our listeners. Thank you so much for joining us today. If you enjoyed today's conversation, do not forget to leave a review and share it within your network. Until we meet next time, stay inspired and keep innovating. Thank you so much.